That's not when I drove.
Call to order.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Comments from the assembly? All right, no correspondence. I'm going to review the minutes from the meeting on January 18th.
No one has any comments, questions, or concerns on the motion?
Okay, a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, plan reviews, Popeyes and Wendy's.
Hi, good evening, Greg.
Combo.
Yeah, it's a great comment, right? Greg Adelman here on behalf of Morgantown Crossings. I'm here this evening with Roger Vanderkluck from Morgantown Crossings and Kristen Ollis from Bowler. As you know, we're proposing to put in two new fast food restaurants, Popeyes and a Wendy's at Morgantown Crossings Shopping Center right near the Sonic. And Chris will take you through the site plan layout very briefly, and then we're happy to answer any questions you have from the review letters. We did submit, got comments revised and resubmitted. So this is a second set of reviews, so we've cleaned up most everything. But Chris will take you through, and then we can answer any questions or comments you might have. Go ahead, Chris.
Sure, so just high level right here, we have black and white plan overall of the existing shopping center. Just to get everyone oriented, Route 23 is at the top of the page here. We have Heritage Drive along the east side, and the area of the two new pads is at the northeast corner of the shopping center. So here's a color rendering of the two proposed users. This existing building that you see here is the existing Sonic. This is the existing right-in, right-out access off of Route 23. That's proposed to remain. The first out parcel that you see here along the, I guess what would be really the west side of the corner here, is a proposed Popeyes. Counterclockwise circulation around the building. Here you can see is the loading area and trash along this back corner. And then on the south side is the proposed Wendy's, similar counterclockwise circulation. We're still maintaining the right-in access only off of Heritage Drive. No modifications are really proposed to this other access off of Crossing Boulevard where it meets Heritage Drive. If you recall, the original development called for a convenience store layout within this area. So big picture wise, we're less impervious area than was out here before. So from a stormwater management standpoint, we will need an NPDS permit. We're over an acre, but because we're adding so much more green area, there's no other stormwater management improvements that are required other than just providing some additional inlets, conveyance piping, really tying into the existing system. So that's kind of a high level. pretty high level of what's being proposed out here. As Greg mentioned, we have our second round of review comments from the township engineer. Happy to go through any of those comments or answer any questions that you may have.
I think there's as far as the letter goes, I think there's probably a couple items here we should discuss, go through a little bit, but I don't know if anybody has any, before we do that, if there are any questions you guys have up front, we'll do that.
This was revised since your review letter that was published, right?
Correct.
So is there just an update from your prior review letter?
I did not bring the previous letter.
I think I read one from March 10th or 14th.
I'm trying to think if there was, I tried to set up the letter to almost placehold the old comments in the event somebody had gone through and still had questions about something that was revised. I really think what they had done was more or less just revisions to make sure it does address the ordinances. Any comments that remain that were worth keeping on there, I think it's, unless somebody has a comment regarding the previous comments, I don't think there was much of a change.
Scott, will they drain off into the pond to the west or the east?
To the one.
There's existing
Yep, right there.
pond in this area here, which ultimately goes underneath the Beacons Drive and ties into that off-site basin.
Well, I think I could, as far as the most recent letter, start going through that as far as the relevant comments. If you would, then, on the first page, comment number 3 under the zoning ordinance, there was the request for evaluating the traffic. Basically, the traffic generated by 2 fast food restaurants, it was assumed that was gonna meet the requirements of the ordinance. They did look at the traffic generated for the whole site. What they did was, since this really is a full land development shopping center, and this was approved under that original traffic study, they looked at the original traffic study, the counts that were coming out of that, and the traffic trips that were generated from each parcel that was looked at that time, and compared it to the existing plus these 2 lots added in. Really, when it came down to it, the AM trips increased what they had on their plan, I think it was by 8 trips. The PM were less, and so was the Saturday peak. Some of that plays into, there was a movie theater assumed in this when they first generated the traffic, so there was a lot of different type of traffic generators that were proposed that you just don't have the same number of trips, or you don't have the same PM trips. Some of them now are more balanced between the AM, PM. There were some comments that I had to ask them to try to adjust that study, but in the end, I do not see that those trips will be increased to the point that it's gonna generate any kind of additional improvements to the roadways or intersections. So that speaks a little more in depth than what you see in the comment there. That's a little bit of the background for what they did propose and what I saw in the review.
Did they tell you by any chance, or do you know approximately how many trips a day will be generated from them?
Would have been in the report, but it
Yeah.
hasn't been in the report with me.
Yeah, I know it was included, but I don't know what the number is.
I think in the PM peak, so for that whole development, the original had the trips over 1,000 in that hour.
For the whole complex?
I think it was, I wanna say 1,000 to 1,100 for the whole complex in that 1 hour. But
as it is now, plus these, it was gonna be, I think,
Significantly less.
I think the PM really was less, where it was 600 or 700, or, yeah, it might have been up near the 800, but it was several hundred less than what the original was assuming.
Than proposed.
And like I said, the AM peak, and I think there's a lot more morning generating traffic, establishments now, the breakfasts and whatnot, but, that was gonna be probably in the end. The one that didn't get added into the account was the, Snap Fitness,
Yeah,
is that the
the
name?
Fitness, yeah.
It's not gonna be a high generating, traffic
Right.
there, but it'll probably put them into the teens or 20 increased traffic, trips, so. Yeah, that's just kinda going off of memory, I think that was close.
You're close.
There were some other comments in zoning. I don't necessarily know that we need to go through them unless somebody has questions on the second page, but at the second, bottom of the second page and into the third, I think this gets into, one of them that we had some discussion. We had a chance to talk today, to go through some of these comments. They had questions, they wanted to, just ask what direction was I going with the comment. And I think the circulation within each one of these was kind of the focus of the conversation here. Do you have that drawing where you guys could pull that up at all? I don't know if you guys wanna look in the plan, I think it was. Side-by-side layouts of two different trucks going through this area.
What is that, sheet 303, right?
Sheet 303, yes.
303.
Basically, this was the layout for the circulation plan of a delivery truck, and for a trash truck that would be visiting the site. Ultimately, I think the northern, well, it's actually the western country, the Popeyes is the one higher on the drawing. There was not really many issues there, except for the delivery truck as it exits. It kind of crosses over some of the different aisles as you drive in. But the lower one on the Wendy's, that was where it was really kind of crossing over the parking spaces, some of the drive aisles, some of the drive-through aisles, and back and forth. I think what was discussed here is that those would really need to be, if this couldn't be changed in any way, it would really need to be restricted to the times that they weren't in operation. Because if there was anybody parked in that lot, it would be almost impossible for it to get through. I think that the concern is if there was ever a truck that would come through there, can it make it through, even if it wasn't a delivery? I would hope that wouldn't happen, but that was the main concern here, and I know that was one of the items that I think we wanted to kind of discuss with the planning commission. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think, yeah, Scott, we did talk about it this afternoon. I think, there's a few approaches in terms of how to handle it. And we recognize we're talking about large semis, 52-foot tractor trailer rigs coming into the lot, as well as trash trucks. So from the standpoint of the operations, we've spoken to the franchisee that for Popeyes, and we've spoken to the franchisee for Wendy's. And both of them have indicated that their large truck deliveries, that 52-foot trailer comes in at night, usually comes once a week. The rest of the time, it's a smaller delivery truck that may be bringing, like for Popeyes, someone's bringing a bunch of chicken wings or whatever, you know, because they need to have a resupply for how much is being sold in a restaurant during the course of the week. So I think that too, we can sort of put language into the documentation, you know, that says, you know, what deliveries are supposed to occur you know, during off hours of the business or non-public hours of the business. That would help. We certainly know from a standpoint of trash, that refuse truck is gonna show up at 5 o'clock in the morning and wake up the neighbors, you know, more than likely. So that trash truck is gonna come in and come out without any customers really being on the property at the time. So I think from an operational standpoint, there are some things that can be put in the documentation that maybe helps. And as I said to you when we talked this afternoon, it's not just about comments on this set of plans, but when the tenants come in for their own separate submissions and approvals, that's something to also be addressed with them at that time as well, I would say.
Could you offer an explanation on why it's not, why there's not an easy solution by just expanding the footprint to accommodate the standard?
I would say it's pretty typical for fast food users like this to have these loading and trash operations happen at night. I mean, we've done hundreds of these, and they're typically pretty much, this is their prototypical layout. So they know what works for them. They know what hours of operations they have. They know when the trash comes. They know when the delivery comes. So it's pretty standard. I mean, quite honestly, to get a WB50 truck to circulate a building like this without conflicting with any spaces becomes a pretty large pad site, if you will. And really just not, you know, quite honestly, it doesn't really make sense when you kind of look at how large something needs to be. And that's why it's, again, it's part of their prototypical package. I mean, they build hundreds of these across the country. It's pretty standard, you know, what their layout is and when their operations take place for trash and loading.
I think as far as the delivery being restricted to the nighttime hours, I think that is very typical. I think it needs to be documented on there, and I understand with the tenant, there's gonna be the agreements and discussions for setting that up. I think at this level, it has to be, I think it's on us to try to require that as part of the land development plan to make sure that that occurs, because we can see it becoming an issue. My biggest concern is just with this, and I'm sure you see it on the property, that there are different trucks that do swing into the development. And, you hope they park in the Walmart parking lot if they're gonna use this area. And I don't know the area well enough that, I'm not down here enough to see if they do that every time, but if they did happen to take in that right-hand turn just to come in there, how do they get out?
Well, you know, I was having, Scott, I had a conversation with Chris earlier after we had talked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know from an operational standpoint, there's a method of doing business that's gonna control this kind of conflict that might occur between the deliveries and the customer. What we do maybe have an issue with, if you will, is the possibility somebody comes during the day that's got nothing to do with a delivery and pulls a truck into the development. And I think there, the answer is we sign it. You know, say no trucks except for deliveries off of 23, and I think that would certainly help to alleviate that issue to the extent we can put those kind of protections in place. That's one thing we certainly could do.
Yeah, I agree though that trying to navigate a truck typically through an area like this, a fast food restaurant, it is tight. I think this is typically limited to, or typically leading to restricting the deliveries, having the no put on the plan, so that if something did happen or occur and it was an issue, then that can kind of be addressed with the property owner or the tenant directly. But I think the plan, the comments were really saying that during a regular operation, this just isn't gonna work. So I think that's why we're here to discuss that, make sure we look to try to address it. And I think, as he said, it's not, you're not gonna see the trucks come in here regularly to do this. I think we asked them to put the signs up to try to discourage that as much as possible. Limit the limit the trucks to hours per the plan. I think that's really what we're trying to do here.
Well, I mean, it shows the truck's path, and it shows that there's plenty of room, providing there's no cars, to get in and out of that parking lot for delivery. Providing there's no cars. The only question I have is where the delivery parking spot is at Wendy's, where it's boxed in at the front of the truck. The proposed Wendy's, right there, at the front of that truck where it's boxed in. What if we brought that, instead of boxing that out, what if we just
Blend it
straightened
into
that out a
curve?
little bit?
Yeah,
So
we could.
instead of having the truck back up in the parking lot, providing you do have customers and workers, the last thing you wanna do is back that truck up in the parking lot.
Just something along those lines there, right, so you bring that.
So
curve.
instead of backing up and making that weird turn,
Sure.
let's just let him pull right on out of there.
I think it's a good idea.
That way there's no backing up. That scares me more than anything.
Sure.
Then getting around the building, that's the driver's responsibility. Cars are not, they have to figure it out. But if he gets in there and then cars come in because he's late or he's early or whatever, that's a problem.
No, that's a great point, we have no issue making that curve
Yeah.
modification so they can pull it back out.
And just stripe it like the rest.
Sure.
In the trash pickup, you said that's morning hours really, or is that, I mean,
That's
to be
gonna be-
determined, or?
That would typically be early morning before business hours. But again, we can state all of that too. We can make a note on the drawings about, trash pickup, prior to. It's not an
It
issue.
looks like everybody's in agreement with the solutions. So we would need to add plan notes, cross-referencing the zoning ordinance section.
Yep.
We would then need signage. Problem solved.
Again, I thought that was just, before it was finalized, it was an item that was brought up, so the planning commission had a chance to kind of look at it and add any comments if they had any. I think the only,
That little road here, do we have to, does it really need to be kept? You're creating more intersections there.
Talking about this leg here,
Yes.
yeah, that's an existing, one of the previous
Yeah,
comments,
I
to your
know,
point
yeah.
I had in there was, that needs to be clearly signed that no trucks can come in, because it's not as
Yeah, once they're
channelized
in there.
now as it is
Yeah.
to be then,
Yeah.
and trucks destroy that curb really.
And that comment's already been picked up in the plans.
Is there an advantage of keeping it, or, 'cause
I think what it allows you to do is it, any traffic, that wants to come in that I guess would be heading, I guess it would be, west on 23, they would be making the left in, or the left at this signalized intersection here, and rather than having to come all the way down, to Crossings Boulevard, it gives them, the ability to make that quick right in and get to those out parcels a little bit quicker than, having to come back all the way down and back through this,
If it's hard to get in and out of a restaurant, you're not gonna go. It's
Right,
obvious.
yeah, that's.
Yeah.
If it's hard to get, Dairy Queen, if it's hard to get in and out, you're not gonna go there. And that was kind of a weird entrance exit.
Anything else, Mr. Hayes? I don't even think we need to talk about the last comment in zoning. So there was in the saldo, moving ahead, page 4, the beginning of that, there was the request for the waiver, sections 301.3 and 403, that's just to have it reviewed preliminary/final. Skip that step of preliminary approval and final approval. So that is a waiver request that's out there. The fire commissioner and fire chief both reviewed it. In the end, the only comment that kind of is still there, they've acknowledged it, but just to add a comment that make sure the Knox box gets put on for the fire companies. page 5, just to acknowledge, there has been reviews by both the authorities. Those are still pending reviews, the approval isn't there, but they've got the comments and they're working on those. The Conservation District, like the city does need a NPDS permit, that's been submitted. It's been accepted for review and it's under review. The comments have not been issued. Stormwater, basically they're all the same standard comments at this point. Anything else has been addressed with the exception of, since they are tying into existing storm sewer ponds, that there is verification that those can function properly and functioning as designed. That was discussed and agreed to that they'll include that in the stormwater reports just to make sure that that's clarified. There is the addition, just because I know that was kind of a recent thing, for the inspection fee associated with the stormwater. There's 10 years where it has to be inspected by the township, and that fee is included, posted separately so that can be inspected by the township. Yeah, last comment with it, just any developer's agreement or any other agreement that the solicitor's office may want to have provided, that's needed as well. Short of that, they did, in the last review, address any of the other cleanup comments that we had. So really, as far as the letter goes, that's the outstanding, well, the action item for the planning commission would be the waiver of waiver of the preliminary final process.
You recommend conditional approval tonight?
I think they could do that. I think, everything we have there is just pending updates to the plan. Outside approvals as well.
So we have a motion for conditional approval.
I'll make that motion.
I think the motion would be subject to a few things that we discussed. Let's just put it on the record for Jeff's minutes. One would be subject to revision for Jeff's comment on the, what are we calling it?
Wendy's loading space.
Wendy's loading space, to the additional plan notes as discussed, and the additional signage as discussed. The signage, I guess, acceptable to the engineer and solicitor for the plan note. And then the satisfaction of all remaining comments in the various review letters, craft engineering, fire marshal, fire chief. I didn't hear that there was any comments that could not be complied with.
Correct.
Right.
Those would be the conditions.
So I'll make that motion under those conditions.
All in favor?
Aye.
And for the, I guess the record, you should probably vote to recommend approval of the waiver request to approve this as a prelim final plan.
I have a motion to approve this prelim and final.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you for telling me.
Our pleasure.
Can I get the bottom one real fast?
Next we have the Morgantown Commercial Extension.
That's all right. I think the other one you took it. That's right. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I didn't. Wasn't thinking about
I'm
it.
just saying, I'll send Stephen text and say,
Yeah, please do. I'm on video right now.
Traffic study was all but approved at this point in time. So they're showing along their access to the properties. PennDOT's getting their ways.
Other business, we have plans for signature, I guess they're in the back. We can
Excuse
get
me,
them.
what project were you just talking about? I didn't hear you.
It was the Morgantown commercial property.
What would that be?
Uh,
The old Turnpike exit?
Yes.
Okay.
Any updates on the plan review chart? I'm aware of, or noteworthy, or?
Just updated, Morgantown Road commercial extension, I imagine for the project we just discussed. We should be able to make the May deadline for them. For Wendy's. Guess we'll keep an eye on that, but
We already took action.
Yeah,
Well-
to,
Supervisors haven't taken action.
the board, yeah. I mean, now you've got the workshop, so you typically don't address formal plan approval at the workshop, right? So it'll be at the May meeting, which is what, 10th, 12th.
so
So you would meet that if the board's ready to do conditional approval.
we'll just keep an eye on that.
Yeah, with that in mind, if something doesn't happen on that date.
I did get a plan that came through, but they didn't submit their Berks County check, cause I have to always send the plans to Berks County for county comments. Now, they didn't meet the deadline for this meeting, but for May, you will likely have a plan for review. It's a subdivision for something on Main Street. But it's on hold till I get that Berks County check, 'cause that's all